Could public sector strikes be on the verge of ending as 1 million workers are offered a pay rise? Teachers, police and some NHS staff will get at least a 6% bump in pay, but it's not a foregone conclusion that will appease unions or go down well with workers.
Obviously, as a head teacher, I'm thrilled that my staff will get the wage they deserve, but I'm also worried about where that money's going to come from and if I can afford it.
But with junior doctors kicking off the longest strike in their history today, their union has rejected the offer. We'll be live on the picket line, also tonight.
So my mum was an alcoholic, and then...
Former England star Dele Alli opens up about his childhood abuse and trauma and his battle with sleeping pill addiction. More than 1,000 dead birds are collected along the Aberdeenshire coast amid fears of another avian flu outbreak. And
the end of the road for Alina Svitolina.
Ukraine's wild card bows out of Wimbledon after a fairy tale run that took her all the way to the semi-finals.
This is the DanTV Evening News with Charlene White.
Good evening. More than 1 million public sector workers have been offered pay rises of between 5% and 7%, with the Prime Minister saying it's the last and final offer. It follows months of industrial strife and covers teachers, police, prison officers and junior doctors in England and Wales. Rishi Sunak urged trade unions to accept the offer, saying there will be no more talks about pay. He also said the government wouldn't be borrowing more money or raising taxes to fund it. The increase is below the 7.1% pay rises seen in the private sector and way below inflation. And whilst it appears enough to end teacher strikes, junior doctors have rejected it. We'll have more of that in a moment. But first, here's our political editor, Robert Peston, on the deal and where the money is coming from.
They're on strike, junior doctors. They've been on strike, teachers. Part of a public service, including the police and the military, who feel underappreciated and underpaid. Though today the Prime Minister announced that on average they'll get pay rises of 6.5%.
I can confirm today that we are accepting the headline recommendations of the pay review bodies in full. But we will not fund them by borrowing more or increasing your taxes.
Which means that these vital public services will have to make savings. That's cuts to you and me.
That means government departments have had to find savings and efficiencies elsewhere in order to prioritise paying public sector workers more.
Consultants, GPs and dentists are to get 6%, as will junior doctors, who also receive a permanent £1,250 rise. Teachers will receive 6.5%. Police and prison officers, 7%. The military, 5%, with an additional permanent £1,000, which is all very well, except that private sector workers are currently receiving 7.7% rises on average. How challenging will it be for departments to make the savings to pay for the pay rises?
The additional costs for public sector employers could be as much as $5 billion or so. Some of that might be offset through additional revenue sources, but it's going to pose some extremely difficult questions about savings that need to be found elsewhere, perhaps cuts to the size of the workforce, and public sector leaders will have a very difficult job on their hands making the sums add up in light of today's announcement.
About £1 billion of new money will come from increased visa and health service use charges for immigrants. But for the NHS, that may not be enough.
We need to look at this extremely carefully. And I think at this stage we are sceptical that this will bring in enough money to close that gap.
The Prime Minister said this was his final non-negotiable offer for all public service workers. And this head teacher in Huddersfield watched as Rishi Sunak revealed one bit of good news.
All teaching unions have just announced that they're suspending all planned strikes immediately.
Great news.
Teachers will return to the class.
Obviously, as a head teacher, I'm thrilled that my staff will get the wage they deserve, but I'm also worried about where that money's going to come from and if I can afford it.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Not quite. Doctors and prison officers have already said no to the offer, but with the teachers settling, it has been a better day for him. Robert Peston, ITV News.
Well, the payoff came as junior doctors in England started their biggest strike yet. They walked out this morning for the first of 5 straight days of industrial action. The 6% is far short of the 35% they want. Our health correspondent Martin Stew has spent the day at the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading.
On the picket lines, the anger is palpable.
Sometimes I come home from work and cry because I've not been able to give patients the care I know they deserve.
The economy's been difficult, times have been difficult, and we've all had to step up our game.
I'm currently drawing out of my savings just to be able to pay on my rent this year.
To cope with the longest doctors' strike in NHS history, hospitals are having to prioritise urgent care.
You're right, if I do your blood pressure, it's okay.
In A&E at the Royal Berkshire in Reading, Emma waited just 5 minutes to have a potential stomach ulcer checked.
They're saving lives. What more can we want? So, yeah, they definitely deserve to be paid more.
This walkout will last until Tuesday. Consultants who go on strike themselves next week are covering, but it's tough in July.
People that would normally cover the strikes are on summer break and are abroad at the moment, which, you know, poses an additional challenge, but so far we're managing to keep things running safely.
Staffing levels will be lower than usual.
Pain-wise, you're okay right now?
But the real impact is on non-emergency care. Strikes over the last 8 months have caused 651,000 routine procedures and appointments to be rescheduled. That's contributed to a record 7.47 million people who are now waiting for treatments.
Come on, Max. Try and play with the ball.
Richard is one of those. He's needed a knee op for 2 years. It should have been this morning. Instead, his pain continues.
There's a dispute. That's difficult, but the collateral damage is people like me.
The impasse is over pay. The BMA union want a 35% increase to restore real-term wages to 2008 levels. The government had offered 5%, but that's now been upgraded to at least 6%, following recommendations by the pay review body.
Well, this is a fair and final settlement. An increase for some doctors in training of as much as 10.3% reflects the huge value of the work that they do, and it's now time that we move forward.
But back on the picket line, they're aware Scottish doctors have been offered 12.4%.
Matt, 6%, is that enough to stop the strikes?
6% would be another real terms pay cut. It would not lead to better retention of doctors in the NHS, and therefore we feel that we have no choice but to keep striking.
So the government's final offer may not be the final act of these disputes.
So we're still in a very tricky situation. On the one hand, the government says it will not borrow any more money to pay more wages. So it doesn't want to put any more money up because it would have to cut frontline services and equipment. On the other hand, the British Medical Association say, well, hang on a minute, in Scotland we got a much bigger pay deal and that's what we would like to see in England. So we are at loggerheads, and all the while these strikes continue, they're going on until Tuesday morning, a reminder, we are seeing more appointments being delayed, and we're seeing emergency services like ambulances behind me being pushed to the max. Pressure is building for a resolution to be found soon.
OK, Martin, thanks very much.